Live. All right. We're live. Are we live? It's counting down. Come on. All right. So this is our first live here on YouTube. And we're going to talk about Joshua Tree and the new climbing management plan that they plan on doing. So we're going to go through their website here on this live stream. And we're going to talk about our answers and read your comments while we go through it. So this is officially starting in 5 minutes. So we're going to wait.
Yeah, we can wait.
We'll wait for some people to come in.
Yeah.
Then we'll, at 10 a.m. in 5 minutes, we'll do another intro and hopefully be able to cut off the beginning of this episode when we publish it on the channel.
So let's check if we're live.
Oh yeah, let's watch our.
Yeah.
Whoa. All right, let's get some people on here. Hey, do we have a person? Is that you?
No, it's not me.
All right, stick with us. We're going to start this in a minute and get a few people on here. Joshua Tree live bolts. Oh, let's practice live screen. Let's see here. Share. Edit. Bobby, where do you think I could share my screen? If I click that, that's not going to do it. Live chat. Come on. Share live stream. No, we don't need to do that. Okay. Send feedback. Am I not able to share my screen? How do I share screen? Is that us?
No.
No. How do I share a screen? Let's get some more people on here.
So, yeah, I'm not seeing it anywhere.
Okay. So let's go to edit. Enable live chat. Live redirect. Details. Visibility. Public. Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Playlists. Audience. This is why we started it earlier.
Yep.
Education. How do I don't know how to share a screen.
It's fine. They can look it up. There's a link in
Changes saved.
comments.
On YouTube Live. You are learning how to do
I
this.
just got a notification.
Oh. Well, let's see how many people join now. Because I think that's just us.
Yeah.
How to share a screen on Facebook Live, YouTube Live.
Oh, we're getting some
All right.
comments.
Hey, David. All right. Sweet. People are joining. Wow, this is neato. Okay. Welcome to our Joshua Tree episode where we are going to talk about bolts and the climbing management plan that they want to have a public opinion on. We're the public and we have an opinion. And I was looking at the questions and I was like, oh, this would be a great thing to do kind of as a group, is discuss what kind of answers we would want to submit. So I don't know how to share my screen. If anybody knows how, let me know in the comments because I'll just put the screen up here. Let me put the copy of the, let's see here, the thing that we're going to, all right. That is the website there in the comments for us to refer to. You're live in Germany. Nice. Bobby, that other guy. And that other guy. That's hilarious. I'm French and still have an opinion on the management of a country I've never been in. You do, because this could set a precedence for how other, at least national parks, are going to be treated in the United States and possibly other areas. So how can we manage ourselves? I think this is super interesting. We are growing as a community. We have a whole new sport called highlining, installing bolts, and our population's growing and our rocks are not. We don't have more rocks. There's the same amount of rocks as we've always had. So it's kind of, things are getting oversaturated. So the National Park Service in Joshua Tree, I'll pull this up, asked for public comment. And for the next few weeks, next 43 days, they are interested in our opinion. And they have 6 questions that we will cover in this video. And after this period of time, they're going to start making decisions, and opinions are harder to implement if they're given at too late of a date. So this is a great time to share. Let's see here.
There's been a lot of calls to action to fill this comment section out from the Access Fund and local climber groups in that area. We're not Joshua Tree locals, but we have climbed down there, and we really feel that this will be setting precedents for other climbing areas in national parks at the very least.
Yeah, I sometimes visit Joshua Tree only once a year. I've highlined there before. I've never installed bolts in Joshua Tree, and I've rigged some all-natural highlines. However, we've done bolting projects in Yosemite, and we feel that anything that Joshua Tree does that is successful would possibly be implemented in Yosemite. And so there are friends of Joshua Tree and the American Safe Climbing Association that
Access Fund
and Access Fund that do try to preserve access there. But this is a new management plan that they're trying to implement, and because there are some stuff we're going to talk about in this video. Now, I got to talk to the superintendent of Joshua Tree, of I forget his title, the guy who's in charge of this. And it was a super nice conversation. And he kind of explained to me why they have this and the process, and how, like, just anything in the government is slow at making things happen. That's why they've given, I think, 2 months open for the public to have an opinion. Then they're going to have meetings and hearings and all this stuff so they can make rules. And once those rules are in place, a ranger is basically just there to enforce the rules. They don't make the rules. This is when the rules are made. And that's super interesting.
Yeah, from Ryan's conversation and seeing Dave talk, he is very climber friendly. I believe he's a climber himself. They're just trying to figure out a system that works for everybody.
Cool. Jetsy, I see your comment about the dyno. Maybe email me one more time after this and I'll hit you up. I had 30 people hit me up right before I left on a trip.
On it.
Nope, Siri, go away. I had about 30 people hit me up right before I left on a trip, and it's just, I wasn't able to reply to everybody. I thought I did, though. I thought I told everybody that I would get back to them. Anyways,
let's go through the questions.
Let's go through the questions. First question is, there are climbs on many rock formations in the park, some of which may have Native American artifacts or rock art, or are important spiritual sites to Native American communities. How could the park best address Native Americans' concerns? And how can the park best address cultural resources and tribal values that may be impacted by recreational use? Somebody recently bolted over petroglyphs, and I believe that was in Moab.
Yeah, near Arches.
Near Arches. That's pretty messed up. I don't know what kind of petroglyphs and stuff are in Joshua Tree, but I don't think we should have any bolts or any climbing in that.
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with areas that have cultural significance being closed off to climbers, especially in Joshua Tree where there are so many other rocks. The similar instance that I'm thinking of is in Wyoming with Devil's Tower, and there's other names for it that might be a little bit more sensitive. They have a voluntary closure in June that's kind of a compromise because that's the biggest rock for several hundred miles. And climbers agree not to climb there because that month and that rock has cultural significance to Native Americans.
Jules, we don't deal with that in Europe as we are the natives. Well, that's a good point. Yeah. So we just need to know the areas that are blocked off. In Yosemite, there is there's Native American stuff, but there's birds nesting in peregrine falcon seasons, and we kind of stay away from the areas. It's like there's more than just us out there. So I definitely think that's worth considering.
Yeah, it's an easy compromise for us climbers to.
There's enough rocks out there.
Yeah, and to respect the rules, and then respect all the biological resources and the cultural resources.
Second question. Right now, most climbs cannot be reached from official trails, and a lot of unofficial trails have appeared over time, created by both climbers and other users. What do you think about building official trails to certain climbing areas and then requiring people to stay on those trails so that vegetation and wildlife can come back into the trampled areas? I have an opinion. It has to be really easy and stupid proof, and people will naturally go. I'm talking to my friend while I'm hiking. It's got to be a clear trail that's marked.
Or you're hiking out after dark.
Or you're hiking out after dark. It just needs to be easy and obvious. And ideally, the most direct path. I mean, if you have to go way around something, a lot of people would be tempted to take the direct route. I definitely think there should only be one trail that goes to a rock.
Yeah, I think this is something that we as climbers really need to do better on, because we're active, we're fit, and we tend to like, oh, there's a rock I'm going to, and go straight to it, no matter if it's if the trail makes most sense. We don't care about erosion or trampling plants or whatnot. And I think putting in intelligent trails is really, really important. And then trying to eradicate as many of those social sucker trails as we can.
Yeah, I think we should just have really clear trails. The stuff you're developing, half the stuff you're doing is about developing the trail to get to it.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time figuring out good trails.
A lot of time. He's trying to make the whole area sustainable, and not just the bolts he's putting in, but bathroom use, trails, locals, and everything. So same thing needs to happen in the park.
Yeah.
Rock climbers use different tools to ensure their safety while climbing. One of the more common tools is a bolt, which is drilled into the rock with a metal hanger that allows the climber to anchor a rope to the rock. There are thousands of these bolts throughout the park, many of which are in wilderness. Does the placement of these bolts affect your enjoyment of the park? Yes, it helps me enjoy the park.
There are a lot of routes that I climbed that I would have enjoyed more if there were more bolts.
Yeah. A lot of the routes in Joshua Tree are hard ass, badass. They're difficult to climb because the bolts are spread out. They're scary. And we'll get to that in a little bit on how bolting should happen. But if you're not a climber, I don't know. I don't think they bother me.
Yeah. And in a situation like that, I think it's worth taking the extra time to camouflage the bolts. There's a number of ways to do that, some that are better than others.
Yep. So wilderness area, come to find out, is an area they're trying to keep wildernessy. And so there are actually rules and laws in place to basically do nothing except the most important necessary things for that area. And bolts are kind of like, how necessary are they? Well, maybe an anchor at the top to get off the rock. That's kind of that gray area. But what they're trying to stay away from is sport routes, where it's just bolts every 6 feet all the way up a rock. And I actually think that's illegal.
Yeah, well, it's against policy. And depending on how you read the act, bolts in general qualify as permanent installations and can be considered illegal. The National Park Service has, in my opinion, taken a fairly lenient stance on them and allowed them in situations where they're really needed, such as anchors or such as like big runouts that aren't protected, but they do frown on sport routes in wilderness areas.
So that's, I think, one of the big rules that are going to come, where it's like whether that's a huge no-no or whether or not some would be okay. But if you have a lot of climbs on a thing, you got more trails there. We impact stuff. We have to acknowledge the fact that we do impact an area. As conversation with David was that slackliners, even when we rig stuff all natural, kind of brings a spectator syndrome where you can get a crowd of 100 people going, ooh, and that has an impact as well. Oh, yeah. It's a visually interesting sport. And so people who aren't used to seeing that are going to stop and park maybe where they're not supposed to, and try to go out of their way to see it, trampling more stuff and having more of an impact. Now, those visitors are already in the park. I don't think the spectators thing is, I don't see it as a huge problem. I mean, they can all stand on the trail or the parking lot and look at it, but of course, I'm the guy who wants to highline. So ideally, if we were just kind of like out of the way, then that makes them pretty happy. We get to do our sport without having too much of an impact.
Yeah. There was a comment, Jules, is Joshua Tree an area where you can use bolts? And it absolutely, you use trad gear, and it absolutely is. There's a ton of trad climbs in Joshua Tree.
A lot. That's I liked doing trad. That's how I learned. So I never really did a lot of the sport routes. So yeah, most of the stuff I've ever done there was trad. Doesn't mean you can't climb. It just means you have to be a little bit more creative. The Hall of Horror line, high line that we rigged was all natural, and that's kind of fun to rig things without bolts. That's a highliner. So that's kind of the culture. Is it's more impressive to establish a high line that requires no bolts than putting bolts in. So luckily that's happened for us, and highlining has curved enough. 2013 it exploded, and then it's kind of like leveled out a little bit. So I don't think our impact in the park is as huge as it was a few years ago. What's the next question? Number 4.
I'll read it. Bolts are common on climbs at Joshua Tree, both in and out of the wilderness area, and many climbs would be almost impossible without them. But NPS policy says bolts in wilderness areas should be rare, and that bolt-intensive climbs, including sport climbs, are inappropriate in wilderness. What kind of climbs do you think the national park should have in wilderness given this policy? Are there types of climbs that are acceptable outside of wilderness areas but not in wilderness areas?
Back to you guys. It's pretty much what we just covered.
Yeah, I'm fine with sport climbs not being in wilderness areas.
Yeah, I am too. I don't know what areas are wilderness in Yosemite. I know there's different parts of Yosemite, but yeah. I mean, most of the stuff I do is trad anyways. All the bolting we did in Yosemite this last year was just to kind of replace things that already existed.
Top anchors, which the national, the Wilderness Act is okay with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've covered that. Replacement of aging bolts and fixed anchors must consider how the climb is accessed from a parking lot. If the route is in wilderness, and if the route meets the expectation of a quality Joshua Tree National Park climb. How could the park determine if a route meets the NPS and climbing community standards? Who should determine if and when a bolt needs to be replaced? What role should the first ascensionist have? And I'd like to pair this up with the 6th question. National Park Service policy also requires that NPS issues a permit before a new bolt is placed or replaced. What should NPS consider when deciding whether to issue a permit or not? That's a lot to cover, but it kind of they're kind of together. You wanna go for that one?
So in areas that I am in, that kind of bolting.
Wilderness starts in Yosemite at 100 feet off the ground.
Okay.
That's interesting.
We'd have to confirm that, but yeah, that's interesting. So in areas that I replace bolts, it's not required to have a permit. And I think having a permit for replacing bolts, it should be easy if they have one. If somebody like myself is going to take the time and spend the money and like give up a day of climbing to go replace a bolt, they think that route's probably pretty important and worth spending that effort on. So I'm not sure how much the park should be involved in that process. I'm perfectly okay. Like there being a little in a national park, there being a little barrier to entry, like to get a bolting permit, but them deciding which routes should be rebolted or not, that seems like a lot of bureaucratic hassle that's not necessary.
So let's back up. So if it's in a wilderness area and it's not a climb that should even be there, that's kind of like one of the parts of the question is.
Yeah. Well, and if they decide it shouldn't be there, take it out. Like, don't let it age out and become dangerous that people are still going to climb. Just take it out, patch the bolts.
You know, when they put in stop signs is after, I think, several people die going through the intersection. No, I don't know if that's true. But when are we supposed to replace bolts? When it has just a little bit of rust on them? Not really. But a little rust isn't going to hurt anybody. A lot of rust is big variable. And do we replace things when they start to break? That's when I replace my ropes. No, but yeah, I like having stainless steel everywhere. Joshua Tree is a desert, in case you don't know that, and doesn't get a lot of water. Technically, zinc plated stuff would last a long time there, but why not put in stainless if you're going to go through all the work?
Yeah, especially if you're replacing something. If you're going to the work to
go through the work
to replace a bolt on a climb that you think is valuable enough to replace a bolt,
you're not saving enough money to use zinc plated stuff. Titanium is not necessary in really anywhere except near the ocean or like areas that have corrosive chemicals, limestones, different types of areas that are obvious. But anyways,
new bolts.
New bolts. I could see why they would want a permit system. Now let's back up a little bit. Bolting used to be very cowboy. It's still very cowboy. If you want to take the time to go establish something, we worship the first ascensionists and the fact they put those bolts in. They didn't ask anybody. Nobody's ever got a permit to put a bolt in Lost Arrow Spire. But some people were like, whoa, you changed them without asking. And it's like, well, there's no real, I mean, I'm not going to touch El Capitan without asking after all the responses on Lost Arrow Spire. But I've never known anybody to ask. That's not like a culture I'm in over here. It's you go do it if you want to do it. Just leave less trace. Don't rebolt something that don't change where the bolts are.
Yeah.
That's a first ascensionist issue. That comes up with
that's
what role should the first what role does the first ascensionist have? Yes, they climbed it in that fashion where they only had that protection, but a lot of the climbs in Joshua Tree are unclimbable because they're too hard, too dangerous. They're all X factor. Like I'm reading through the book and it just says X, R, X, R. And you're like, what the hell? Bobby puts in bolted routes that are new friendly. And so anybody who's trying to learn how to climb a 5.8 isn't going to be like on a run out. So you can see that in our bolting videos, how he's like puts them pretty close to each other.
Not that close.
Yeah, but the screen's only this big, so I can't go further.
Yeah, so we kind of circled back to replacing bolts, and kind of an issue that brought up is should the FA be contacted when bolts are being replaced? And I don't think so. Like if you're moving bolts or retro bolting, adding bolts, yeah, FA should probably have a consideration. But if the FA is no longer maintaining their route with good hardware, yeah, somebody who's community service minded enough to go and replace that hardware, I don't think they should have to jump through a bunch of hoops to do that.
The National Park Service does not want to babysit bolting. They don't have time. They have millions of visitors to deal with. National parks have a lot bigger problems than bolting, especially slackliners. They don't have time. So if we can self-regulate a little, how can we confirm somebody is good at it? Because that's a concern that was brought up in those questions, and a concern David has, like, how do you know who's going to do it right?
Yeah.
After 400 brake tests, I'm still trying to learn how to do it wrong. We just
to get a bolt that would fail under a normal climbing fall.
Short wedge bolts in sandstone.
In wet sandstone.
Short bolts in wet sandstone are dangerously low.
Yeah.
Short, skinny mechanical bolt. It's just like too much glue, not clean holes, expired epoxy. We've just tested like so many things, and a lot of stuff hasn't come out yet. So many things that just bolts don't come out as easy as, like, they're all super strong.
And to be clear, we're not recommending doing any of those things, but we've tested worst case scenarios, and they're still
rusty
failing.
leaper hangers are breaking at 20 kilonewtons.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they all do that. It just means I'm not as concerned about bolts as I used to be. I'm concerned about rocks. I have more faith in cams and nuts and the gear we use, and have less faith in rocks. So I don't think we need to have some huge vetting process on whether or not somebody's installing right. It'd be nice to know that they were using the right hardware. It'd be nice to know that they glanced at the bolting Bible, or have put in a couple hundred bolts somewhere else, which I don't know. How do you get experience without putting in bolts? But you have to have experience before you put in bolts. Go with somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mentorship is super important and like would be super helpful. Unfortunately, like, I didn't have access to that. I looked for that. Ryan, same deal. So we decided to develop our own resources.
Since your videos, I only use expired glue and dirty holes. I'm glad you really picked up where we were trying to put down there. So what if we, or somebody like Access Fund or the ASCA, what if they did like a bolting certification process that wasn't hard for them to manage, wasn't hard for you to get? You're just like, hey, I put in these, here's my resume, I've practiced, you've done it in your driveway.
Here's a video of me putting in a bolt.
Here's a video of me doing it in my backyard somewhere, and taking a one-page questionnaire and being like, this person is past whatever, like getting a driver's license.
Like an easy barrier to entry that shows you care enough to go through the process. And
then let's say the Access Fund or ASCA gives you a stamp of approval, and then the National Park will be like, oh, you know what you're doing. What do you want to change? We'll give you a permit if that's okay. And it doesn't sound like it'd be too hard of a process there. The rangers feel accessible in Yosemite to me now. So if I felt like something on El Cap needed to be changed, I could be like, hey, what do you think about this? This is what I want to change it with. And it'd probably be like, cool, or no, here's the reasons. They're not trying to keep us from having safe bolts. They're not trying to keep us from having fun. They're trying to like follow the laws and help millions of people enjoy the same area, so it still looks good in 20 years. And it's
and you can tell he's almost 40 that he has that opinion.
Yeah. The fact I care about rules means I'm getting older. We did a TV show called Pushing the Line. It comes out, I believe, in June. It's on Discovery Plus. That was a shameless plug there. But anyways, during the show, it was in last October, Bobby was helping on it as well. We got to work with the BLM closely, because the BLM followed us around everywhere while we were filming this. It was a month-long process, and I see why the BLM wants to keep an eye on things, especially a commercial shoot or a commercial gig like that, where there was many people doing a thing for many weeks and had a lot of impact. And it was in areas that we loved.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, whoa, if the BLM wasn't here to like keep it to a minimum, they still let us have the show. They want us to do that. They just want us to like not screw the area up.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. Because it's like, if it's just you and your friend, it doesn't feel like a huge impact. But if there's 70 of you, you're like, whoa, it's a lot of trash, a lot of walking and stomping. And nobody walks in single file lines through the desert. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Everyone likes to walk 2 by 2 or 6 by 6, depending on how big their group is. So people have brought up camouflage hangers. We have a section of that in the bolting Bible. It doesn't last very long.
So there's complicated question. Mentioned earlier, glue-ins, they are way lower impact, even stainless steel. I've thought about camouflaging glue-ins, but half the time on some of the rock that I bolt, I can't find the glue-in, just stainless steel, and I put it in. And there's a heat treatment that you can do with stainless, that you bring it up to a certain temperature, and that causes
before you glue it.
Before you glue
it.
Yeah. And that causes a little layer on the outside of the bolt to form. And there's a long range from like light tan or yellowish to like deep purple. And there's some ranges in there that kind of match, that would match a lot of rock colors.
I am a painting contractor when I'm not breaking things, and you're clipping a carabiner, you're going to scratch it off.
Yeah.
I was just on the fixed lines going up to Heart Ledges on El Capitan, and all the Metolius powder coated hangers. Powder coat's almost all gone, and they're starting to rust. Like, it's got to just be stainless. There's no coating or anything that's going to last. And the fiery method and just keeping it the natural metal is the only way that's going to.
Yeah. And to be clear, that's not something I've played around with yet, because I don't feel like I need to camouflage my bolts, but it is something that other people are doing.
What about preventing bolting on archaeology sites? Yeah, we covered that earlier in the video. If it's special to somebody, there's enough rocks out there for us to climb. We really don't need to be climbing in every square inch of the earth.
So a lot of that is education. Like, is that something that the park can do? Like in that situation in Moab, that seems like that guy ignored a lot of information that's already out there. But I mean, that's something the park can do, like in pamphlets and like having signs and stuff, like this is what it looks like, avoid these zones.
Just climbing a rock has impact, right? So like from the valley floor, you look up at Lost Aerospire, you can see the line that people climb, because that's where there's no
lichen.
There's no lichen on that area for 6 feet. That's not 6 feet. That's why my screen is 6 feet, wherever people's feet are constantly being placed. So imagine that being on a petroglyph or a anything that's special. You're going to see, just like you see on a trail, impact from people walking. You're going to see that on rock. So let's see, what other questions you guys have? I feel like why do we even have to protect petroglyphs? Like, it should be so common sense to not screw that up. Education, I think, is a huge thing. If people think it's special, they're not going to screw it up.
Yeah.
If people think it's just some 4-year-old did some shitty graffiti and they don't realize that it's 7,000 years old.
1,000 or 2,000 years old.
Well, what I saw, when I was in Moab, we got to take a helicopter ride over to the large panel of petroglyphs. Forget the area. That was older than the pyramids. Okay. That wall, that panel, super fascinating. And it just kind of looks like some climbers were bored, but they're special and they're old. And like, I don't know much about petroglyphs. I don't see them often. So education's huge. That's why we do bolt busters. Like, hey, this is how bolts fail. Use common sense when you're putting them in. Every situation is different. Every bolt and glue is different.
Can we go to the top of these questions and just come down and answer interesting ones?
Yeah, we can. Let's see here. Show me your bolts. Jordan Brewer, can you say hi to me? Hi. Since when did humans get taken out of the nature equation? Yes, animals and plants are all too often put before humans by tree-hugging loons. I am 50% on that side of the argument. Let me climb my rocks, but I also see how much of an impact things have.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
there's large groups
why
of
do we need
people.
to have more impact than we need to have to climb the rocks?
I mean, Mars looks cool and all, but this place is still pretty nice. So we're terraforming Mars, but we're unterraforming the Earth. I don't know. Yeah, I love bolts. When 100 people stop to watch me flail on the 5.6. Well, so David said there was 800 bolts that were placed without permits.
In the last how many years?
In the last, I don't know.
Since they've been keeping track.
That's a lot to keep track of. It's really hard for them to manage. It'd be nice if we did a little bit more self-management, because then they wouldn't manage us. There's more people bolting out there. I don't know if Bobby and I have made bolting cool, and if that was something like more people are going to do now, or if less people are going to do it because they see how much work goes into it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully people do it better.
So here's a good point. A lot of trad lines will have bolted anchors. This is Gavin, and which he thinks is important. A lot of tree anchors can cause environmental damage, which I think is an excellent point, especially in Joshua Tree, because people have anchored off of Joshua trees and pulled them over, which is a big no-no. And it's Joshua trees aren't that strong.
I feel like you're singling out slackliners.
Is that something you all do?
Well, climbers don't do that. Slackliners have pulled trees down.
I know climbers have as well. I've heard stories of that. Yeah. Or putting so much wear on it that it dies.
Yeah. Gavin also said, I think replacing bolts should be as easy as possible to keep climbs safe and up to date. Yes, if there's a lot of BS in order to change a bolt, they're not going to get changed as often. Do I think old bolts are going to fail and kill us? Especially in a low moisture environment? Not really. So how many of these actually should be replaced? I don't know. The last project we did was the Spire, and the reason we did that is because the bolts were pretty gnarly. Highliners are using them. There were too many, and there was multiple reasons to do it, but I'm not trying to go and change every freaking bolt in Yosemite that has a little rust on it.
So Ratherby, how about mandatory stainless powder coated to match rock color, or they get chopped? I think making stainless a priority, like Ryan just said, in that environment, it's not as critical. But I mean, I'm never going to put in a plated steel bolt that's permanent.
Powder coat's just not going to last.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have to go back and start chopping all the 5-year-old bolts. Roberto, how can a French person give an opinion in this matter? Have you been to Verdun? It's a bolting nightmare. There are places that are a shit show because people just kind of have bolting wars. Ego is like a yin and a yang in bolting. It is a reason people bolt well. It's also a reason people are like chop a bolt and leave it, or what's that called? Environmental terrorist?
Yeah.
To be an environmental terrorist. Like that's positive and negative to everything.
There's a question about permits. Do you need a permit for each bolt?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So I think the permit process is something like, this is the climb I want to replace. These are the bolts. These are how many bolts I'm going to replace.
Pretty sure you can do that on their website.
Yeah.
But they're going to basically lay down some laws in their new climbing management plan. And I'm actually going to put this in the comments. That's not correct. Okay, so the bottom of this has a PDF. Let me delete this one. And the PDF at the bottom of this page is their new climbing management plan idea. And that's why they want our opinion. Now, call to action. Fill this out. Submit your answers to these 6 questions to them on literally the thing I just posted. So that way, let's say there's 112 of us now. There'll be maybe another 1,000 or 2,000 people that see this. If everybody submits this, only takes a minute. We've already talked about kind of our opinions, put your own. That way there's enough thoughts for them to go through, for them to get like a big picture view of what we need as climbers.
And it also shows how much as a community that we care about this resource, that we're willing to take the time to give input when they've asked for it.
If only 20 people fill this thing out, they're like, oh, this just isn't that important to people. And it kind of is. This is instead of bitching later about it, this is the time to submit
and this is not something they're doing willy-nilly. Like, they've spent several years and probably thousands, if not a lot more dollars researching this. They've like cataloged thousands of routes in the park. Like, they've put a lot of time and energy to understanding the issue and trying to come up with good solutions. Yeah,
I do feel like they care and are trying. And I don't actually know if David climbs or not.
In the open forum that I saw, he talked about coming to the park first as a climber.
Okay. So, yeah, it's a lot of the people who do manage the park don't use it the way we use it. And so they do need to hear from us. So please go to the link. I'll put that in the description of this video when we make this public. And then, yeah.
How about Metolius hanger stickers? Those are not good enough.
Not super good. Bolting regulation sounds like certification for tattooing. These are actually really fun. 7 bolts have already failed in Joshua Tree. Interesting.
That's easy to believe.
Yeah, I'm not saying they don't need to be replaced. I just think sometimes people replace things that are not bad yet. So the question is, when do you change them? Who determines that?
Yeah.
Anybody motivated enough to go change it? I don't think the national park is going to change it.
Yeah, they don't want to.
They don't want to. They don't want to manage us doing it any more than, hey, I'm doing this. Cool. Thanks for letting us know. Kind of a more formal process than that. But yeah, rope access and climbing podcast. Educate yourself and respect the space. Speaking of rope access and climbing podcasts, we may or may not have a really good video coming out tomorrow. So we collabed on something. It was pretty cool. Glue on natural rock chicken heads and girth hitch them, problem solved. Not saying that's a bad idea until somebody finds them.
Well, you
complains about it.
To be strong enough to hold on to the rock, you'd still need a bolt into the rock.
True, but just like when I get a fake tooth, what are these called?
Implant?
The implant. They are going to put a female end in my jaw and then a male stud in the tooth. You could actually put a bolt, glue in a bolt into a rock. I'm not saying how to do this.
We're going deep down a rabbit hole that we shouldn't be going down.
And then
abort.
You could make that bomber, but that's not ideal. I don't know if I'm going to save lives on this channel because more people might actually try slacklining and highlining. Statistically, that's not good. Yes, actually, they do help manage it. You guys actually talked to the climbing rangers. We did.
So we're talking specifically about replacing bolts. We're not talking about climbing management in general. We're talking about specifically replacing bolts. And you can disagree with me.
Yeah.
But I don't think the park wants to replace bolts.
The park wants to not have bolting issues and to manage the other stuff they have on their plate. So as frictionless as it is for them as possible, as frictionless as possible for us to get the permits, to know what to change and when to change it. And so the Truth Defenders, I've set hundreds of concrete anchors as an electrician and I'm certified by Healthy. How different is the process and bolt type to construction? Not much. There's some, I would say, aesthetic techniques that you can do to make it look nice and clean or whatever. Not that everybody even does that in climbing. but we don't really have a certification for bolting and climbing. Just kind of just do it. Sometimes you write a bolting Bible because you have so many notes. You just do your own research. And
that's a good question. I don't know if we want to answer it.
What's the question? Which one?
In practice, do bolters really adhere to hand drilling, or do they low-key sneak in lithium hammer drill? We hand drill.
Lost Hero Spire.
Yep.
Well, that's why we, if you look at the video.
I still have soreness in my elbow from hand drilling.
If you look at the video, we brought 7 20-year-olds because you can't bring a drill. There are ways around it, but as highliners, we're on top, so it's a lot easier to just like muscle it. Yeah, definitely people stealth bolt. But I mean, hand drilling's a bitch. I've done a lot of it.
Yeah. I think you should adhere to that hand drilling. Like it's there for a reason to limit the access, limit like the bolts that go in wilderness areas.
Makes me want to install less bolts naturally.
Yeah.
So that's a
but
positive.
Stealth bolting with hammer drills, we know what happens.
Hold bolts, keep the riffraff off. Not sure if that works, but
well, they can't climb if they have to go to the hospital.
Speaking of that, you'll find out why Bobby has a haircut in an episode coming out in about a week. Yeah. Okay. There is the IRATA, even though it's not for climbing. IRATA for bolting. They actually certify for bolting. I'm not sure.
This is my friend Jonathan. Is there a log that someone keeps that shows when bolts were put in? It's not something that's internationally or even done in the sport. Like some people keep personal logs.
If you got a permit in Joshua Tree to install a route,
yeah, there would be the log of
that would be the record of it.
And also with kind of social media climbing, like when the FAs are posted on, say, Mountain Project, like that kind of serves as a record as well.
Sweet. I'm going to put the link in the description. Let me know if you guys like live streams. It's kind of fun
for us.
It's kind of fun to just be in conversational mode rather than like YouTube voice. It's really hard to do conversational YouTube. But yeah, let's check out the Romer hangers. Yeah. I think we're actually going to go test some right now.
Yeah, we have some loaded on the Slack.
In the Slack machine. Yeah, we left in the machine so we come and do this at 10 o'clock. So that'll be in a caving brake test video that we got. So anyways, hit the like button, but more importantly, go to the NPS. I'll put it one more time here. Go there, fill that out. Thank you for joining us and giving us your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, it was super fun to talk to you all. Hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah. We're going to go break some stuff now. Cheers.